It's time to wake up. It's time to see reality for what it is. And what is reality? Well, first of all, it's not a dream. It's not fantasy. It's not fiction. And for a lot of us, a lot of what we think to be exciting, to be wondrous or magical, is something that is for kids, something that's for fiction, for movies, for comic books, not something that's not real. But actually it is. But why do we initially not see it that way? Why do we see the world as something that's at best not so exciting, something that we need to escape? Right? If you really want to have fun, you have to go watch a movie. Why is that? Or play a game. Why is that? So we can say that there's something actually in those movies, in those games. There's a point of truth. There's a point at which our soul is drawn to it. But that needs to be explained, because most of what is in that movie, just like when we have a dream, most of the dream is silly. Most of the dream is foolishness. But there's a point of truth many times to dreams. There's something true about it, but it's surrounded by a whole bunch of silliness. And so too, the best stories, the best fictional stories, the most compelling games, they have something to them. But most of it, like a dream, is filled with just silly make-believe. So when a child comes to you and they have all these types of ideas, all their imagination, their creativity, there's some true elements, but there's also a lot of kid elements to it. So how do we wake up to see that this reality is something really exciting? That we don't need to, how do we reach the point where we don't need to escape to movies and games? How do we reach the point where we see that this reality that God is creating at this very moment is filled with wonder, filled with magic, something to be excited over? So first we need to tell the story of the lost spark, the lost element, that element of truth, of holiness that is within these fictional stories. And we need to redeem it. We need to redeem that point of truth within these stories. Because that actually is what makes those fictional stories so exciting to begin with. It's not the fictional elements, it's the element of truth within those stories. And so we're gonna give one example today, and hopefully we'll continue and give other examples. And in some ways, the story that we're about to bring is the penultimate example of what it means to have a true, something that is actually started off as something true, but it became viewed as a fiction. For instance, like many mythologies, we imagine different monsters and different things. It started off by some real story or some real animal, some real happening, and a mythology, a fiction was created around that. And so too here. So we have a story of Moses. This is after he flees for his life from Egypt, that Pharaoh had found out that Moses had killed an Egyptian. This Egyptian was beating another Jew. And Moses, even though he grew up in the palace of Pharaoh, that's why he's called the Prince of Egypt, but he knew that he was Jewish, and he couldn't stand idly by as one of his fellow Jews was being beaten. And so he killed this Egyptian. this wicked Egyptian. And news got out, and Pharaoh tried to kill him. We will not go into the details of the story right now, because that could be another video. But Moses escapes, and he escapes to the land of Midian. And in this land of Midian, he comes across the daughters of this person Yitro. And seeing that Moses was maybe a special person, maybe a prospective match for one of his daughters, one of his single daughters, Yitro invites Moses back to his home. This is before the burning bush, before Moses is called to the task of returning to the land of Egypt to redeem the Jewish people, to free them, and ultimately to have them receive the Bible, the Torah at Mount Sinai, and then to enter the land of Israel. This is before all of that. And here Moses is, and he finds himself in the house of this Yitro, a very interesting character in his own right. And this is again in the land of Midian, after Moses escaped for his life from Egypt. And here I'm going to read here, and this is from a book called The Midrash Says. This is different rabbinic stories. What I'm actually going to read is not a classical midrash or rabbinic story, but there's several different very old sources, rabbinic sources, authentic sources that discuss the story in varying degrees. There's different variations to the story, but the elements are pretty much similar. And so we're going to discuss this particular version, because this is the version I have in front of me, but it's discussed in again, other old, authentic Jewish sources, rabbinic sources. So it says here, when Moses later withdrew to the garden behind Yitro's house to thank God for having sustained him and kept him alive. Right? He was freed, he was saved from being killed in Egypt, he escaped, and now he finds himself in relative safety in Yitro's house. And so he went to thank Hashem, to thank God, otherwise known as prayer. He noticed a sapphire rod sticking out of the ground. He removed it and brought it to Yitro to find out whose it was. So that's a mitzvah, it's a good deed to return a lost object. So in this version of the story, he was simply returning a lost object. And this Yitro exclaimed, "If you were able to move this staff, you must be its rightful owner," exclaimed Yitro. Knowing then, according to astrological calculations, it is very special. I therefore took it from the Egyptian court after the death of Joseph, the biblical Joseph, the famous Joseph, to whom it originally belonged. So originally this belonged to Joseph. Interesting. The stars predict that the owner of this rod will redeem the Jews from Egypt. Wow. No one else was ever able to pull it out of the earth. Okay, so you may recognize a fictional story, a very famous fictional story, but we're going to continue and then we'll explain. The staff which Moses pulled from the ground in the garden of Yitro had been fashioned by God himself, who had then given it to Adam, the first person. It was handed down to Shase, and then to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and then Moses. Later, after Moses' death, it was passed on to King David and the succeeding kings of the dynasty of Judah. So this is a story that is well discussed. It's discussed in several places. And needless to say, hundreds of years before the legends of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And what is the famous legend of King Arthur? Is that he was able to pull the sword of Excalibur from the stone. Now, it is hard to believe. It is possible. But it is very hard to believe that the person, whoever wrote that legend of King Arthur pulling the sword of Excalibur from the stone, did not know about this story of Moses. It's very, very hard to believe. But even so, even if he didn't know about it, regardless, the fact that this sword of Excalibur, this legend of King Arthur, is so compelling is, again, why is it so compelling? Because it's the point of truth. It's the true story behind the fictional story. It's not the fictional story. It's the element of truth, or in this case, the entire story that the Jewish sages say about Moses. And this sapphire staff that belonged to Adam, this mystical, magical staff made of sapphire. So why is this? Why can we say this is a penultimate story? The ultimate legend, the legend of a born, how a leader is born. Because it's not about the whole thing is that we're trying to extract the element of truth from fiction. Like we said last time, that what remains from Captain Picard's experience in this episode called The Inner Lights, a flute. This is the song of his soul. This is the symbolism here. So every time you want to come out of a dream, come out of a fiction, you're left with something real. You're left with something tangible to do in this world, some mission to do in this world, something purposeful. And so what we're left with is a lesson in true leadership, is that Moses wasn't trying to become a leader. Quite the opposite. He debated with God, it says, for a week about trying to get out of becoming the redeemer of the Jewish people. But he was the chosen person because of his humility. Right? He's called the most humble person on the face of this earth. And who is the person that wrote that sentence in the Bible? Moses himself. So humble that he could even write that sentence. So again, what's the it's a great, very great lesson in leadership. That the greatest leaders are those that are the most humblest. They're servants of God. They view themselves as complete servants of God. Until we got to the point where we have an actual king of Israel, King David, and he views himself as the most lowly individual, but yet he's king of Israel, and a great and wondrous king at that. So what's the lesson here? First, we have the lesson that we have to wake up. And if for instance, if you liked this legend of the sword of Excalibur and King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, to know that the real excitement was in the real story of Moses pulling out this sapphire staff from the ground. This story, this rabbinic story, that was hundreds of years before King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. But then we have to take a real lesson from this, a real lesson from the life of Moses, is that, first off, that maybe he was just trying to do a good deed, just trying to return something to Yitro. And then when he saw that Yitro was so excited, so then he saw that there was something else behind this, but he was just trying to return. Like, oh, yeah, you left this in the backyard. So there's a viral video, I guess, taken from Disney World or Disneyland, where they have reenacted the sword of Excalibur, and he showed this lady who just walks up and is able to remove it. This guy who's been trying and trying to remove it is like astounded, and then he's like, okay, let me try again. And every time that he tries, he's not able to, and he keeps on calling back this lady to remove it. And 3 times, I believe, she's able to remove it. And every time, he's not able to remove it. So this video was seen by millions of people. And what's so exciting about this story? Because it's a real life example. I mean, it's obviously like a joke. You know, it's just a fake sword, and it doesn't mean that it speaks to the leadership potential in all of us. Because she wasn't trying to do anything. It was just like, just having some fun. But we should know that this is something that kids naturally get. And why this story is so exciting is because it's a story that, from the youngest ages, a kid can understand. Is that we each have a leadership potential. And sometimes it helps to really